let's look at some ways to control our render times and the quality of light in our renders. So over here I'm in the render tab, and the first thing I'm going to look at is the type of rendering. So under device we're using GPU to do our render. If we switch to CPU, look how slow this is to resolve the image. It takes about, I don't know, 5 seconds. If I switch this to GPU, now it's about 2 seconds to get to the same point. So to set up this GPU, you go to File, User Preferences, System on the right side, and then switch this to CUDA or OpenGL or whatever you have here. And make sure these two are checked on. So one represents your video card and the other one is your CPU. And this way we can render using both of them at the same time. Alright, so next we have our render resolution. That stuff I'll just leave the same. And down here, these are our clamps. So clamps are pretty important too. And this will sort of limit the light to a certain amount. So the direct light is kind of our first strong light here. So if I bring this down to like 0.0 something, this makes the scene pretty dark. Let me do the same with the indirect light. So the indirect light is when the light hits the surface and bounces off that first time. That's the indirect light that we're getting on that second surface that the light hits. So this is with pretty much no light, right? So let's bring back the direct light, and here you can see the direct light, and it looks kind of like 90s graphics, right? But then when we bring in the indirect light, you can see stuff bouncing around and coming in for the shadows. So this is nice when we have really dark pockets of shadows and we need to bring in some light there. But also, sometimes these areas in the shadows can get pretty noisy when the scene is more complicated. So we can use the clamp to sort of limit the amount of, it kind of cuts off the computations at a certain point, so we don't waste time, too much time there rendering. So basically you try to adjust these two until to as low as they can be without affecting the lighting in your scene, and that'll just make the render a little bit faster. So next we have samples. So this is how much quality we're going to use. Right now we're using 64. We can bring this up, and that'll just get rid of more noise here. Kind of slowly, but yeah. And then next we have bounces. So transparency is like for glass, and then we have diffuse as our regular bounces. So see if that changes it. But you know, in general, these ones I don't ever go to 3 for glossy or diffuse. For diffuse, I usually leave it low, like 1. 0 will cut out that first bounce, so that's a pretty drastic change here from 0 to 1. But then from 1 to 2, not too much of a change. So you can get away with just 1 bounce on the diffuse and 1 bounce on glossy, usually. But yeah, lower is going to be faster. And then aside from that, there's this tile size, but I usually leave this at 32. Especially if you're using the GPU rendering with the CPU and GPU combined, like I showed you in the user preferences, this is only available in the daily builds. So if you're using regular Blender, you won't have this option. But yeah, so I recommend using the daily builds, and you'll get this extra speed here. And you'll also be able to use this 32 tile size, and it'll be faster. So definitely, if you want to improve your speed, use the daily builds. And okay, I think that's enough for now, and I hope this video helped get a little